Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into a Tuesday, February 7th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We're streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, as well as, of course, dailyfaceoff.com. He's former NHL netminder, current Daily Faceoff analyst, Mike McKenna. Mike, what's going on?
Oh, man, just living, 5 straight days of youth hockey on the ice. It's just the way it should be, I guess, when we're parents, right? I'm sure you're probably in the same boat when it comes to all the youth stuff. So enjoying it. Enjoyed seeing some hockey back on the ice last night as well.
Oh, yeah, big night on the ice. By the way, it's crazy, just on a quick youth hockey aside, that this season is winding down already and already, depending on who you talk to, in tryout mode and developing next year's roster already. So youth hockey, the game never sleeps. Let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock, Mike, because we have some news to get to right off the top. As I reported earlier this morning on dailyfaceoff.com, some breaking news that Marty Walsh will be formally named the new executive director of the NHL Players Association shortly after the president's State of the Union address on Tuesday night. Walsh needed to attend in person the joint session in Congress. He is the current sitting U.S. Secretary of Labor. He is, of course, the former mayor of Boston as well, a 2-term elected official there, who then jumped to the Joe Biden cabinet in 2021. And Mike, this has been out there for a little bit in terms of it being rumored. I'd expect an official announcement potentially before the end of the week. He's expected to be formally rubber stamped by the NHLPA's executive board. And when you think about it, it's a little bit of an outside the box hire in a number of different ways. One, Walsh is previously unconnected for the most part to the hockey world. He's someone that, obviously being in charge of labor unions and then the mayor of Boston, does not have a traditional hockey past. On top of that, he's also the first new executive director in NHLPA history who's not a lawyer, so does not have a legal background as well. When you consider, all of the potential ramifications and how important this hire is for the NHLPA to get right, what jumps out to you?
Well, you touched on the first part in that Walsh is not a lawyer. I mean, he's not a classically trained or educated person, right? He got his degree in 2009 after working for years as a laborer and being president of the Laborers Union 223 in Boston. And I think this is a really good choice for the players because they're grabbing somebody who it seems you'd have to want to take this job, put it that way, right? Like, you're not taking it just for money reasons. Walsh can do fine in any sector he wants with his resume at this point. He needs to feel the desire to take on a fight and to be able to go back kind of to his roots with labor unions. So the fact that he's not a lawyer, though, man, like, that's the thing in union discussions we talk about all the time. Well, a lawyer is going to be expensive. We're going to have to find a lawyer. Well, the NHLPA was able to go out and manage to find somebody who wasn't, but has that same background in negotiating and dealing with big topics, man. Mayor of Boston, sitting on the cabinet for Biden, like, he's a pretty big dog, Frank. I'm excited by this. He is a hockey fan. I think that's going to help.
Yeah, this is certainly the most high-profile hiring that the NHL Players Association has ever done. It will formally mark the end of Don Fehr's 11-year reign whenever the news is announced. And as expected and reported in the story, the NHLPA's cabinet under Walsh is expected to remain very similar. Special assistant to the executive director, Matthew Schneider, as well as counsel Don Zavalo, and assistant as well, Ron Hainsey, and then Mike Gillis as consultant. Those guys are all expected, at least in the beginning, to remain at their posts. As I reported, an announcement official could come before the end of the week. Let's turn our attention, Mike, back to the ice and talk about what was the game of the year, probably one of the most exciting non-playoff games I've watched in the last handful of years. There's just about everything you could ever want in the Calgary Flames visit to the Madison Square Garden to face the New York Rangers on Monday night to kick off the unofficial second half of the NHL season. There was monstrous hits, some pretty goals, back and forth action, and an intensity that's really been missing for the bulk of this regular season to start. What's your favorite part about this 5-4 win for the Rangers?
Well, I hope it's a sign of things to come because it was a great game. Chances go in both directions, but you touched on it with the intensity, and it all started in the first period when Naz Kadri went behind the net and hit Jacob Trouba. It wasn't a dirty hit, but it was kind of like on the borderline, right? And it caught Trouba's attention. Keandre Miller chased Kadri up the ice a little bit, and you could just tell that there was going to be fireworks in the game, and it came through. I mean, Trouba had to fight twice because of clean hits, because that's what we do in hockey now. And Sammy Blais levels Milan Lucic. And the thing that I really noticed, though, is that I think the Rangers were the more focused team, right? They ended up getting 2 power plays off of those Trouba hits. They made the Flames pay. They did have a few more chances than the Flames did. And I thought that this game just was a big statement for the Rangers in saying, hey, we will not be pushed around by a team. We are going to put our foot down here, and we're going to play our game. And both teams did it, and it was pretty exciting outcome. Big goal for Lafreniere at the end, too, and you could see how mad at Markstrom was. Man, smashed a stick, took a minor out of frustration. Whew. Quite a game, Frank.
Yeah, quite a game is right. Did you have any issue with the hits, Trouba on Kadri and also Blais on Lucic?
None. No. And Blais was reviewed. It was a hit to the body, totally fine. And Trouba stepped up on Kadri. And I tell you what, I even took a look at Kadri's helmet to see how he wears his chin strap, because I figured it was way loose, and that's why it flew off. Kadri actually wears his chin strap pretty properly, man. Like, it's only like an inch below his chin. That was just that hard of a hit. Trouba sees him coming. He's got him in the trolley tracks. So I had no problem with either of them, and neither did Daryl Sutter, head coach of the Flames.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I thought the hits were extremely clean. Physical. That's the way the game should be played. I kind of mentioned on social media, I was really surprised to see that Kadri wasn't taken for an evaluation as part of the concussion protocol. You mentioned how he wears his chin strap. People were like, well, why would you check him out for a concussion if it wasn't a hit to the head? And I'm like, guys, we should know enough about concussions and how they work now that you do not require a hit to the head in order to be concussed. I mean, just look at the rotational force on the helmet, because you mentioned he's wearing it properly, to get it to fly off like that. And then to think that, hey, this guy doesn't need to be examined. I don't know how.
Yeah, dude, he knocked his block off, literally.
Like, quite literally. And everyone's like, what are you talking about, moron? Why are you soft? And look, I get it. Come at me. Say whatever you want on social media. I think it's possible to like and enjoy the physicality and think it's clean, and also have concern for players' brains that these two things are not mutually exclusive.
I'll buy you a beer to that, Frank. I totally agree, man. We can play hard, but we can also play safe. And it surprised me too. Kadri got drilled there, man. Like, that was big time.
That's the hit of the year. And Jacob Trouba has a long list of candidates on there. It seems like every night he catches someone, and so maybe someone should be ready for that. Maybe they should read the scouting report next time. Let's transition to the Pittsburgh Penguins. There was some news from their general manager, Ron Hextall, on Sunday. He held a press conference just about a month ahead of the NHL's trade deadline on March 3rd and said, hey, look, we're probably not going to be in the market to be trading our first-round pick. He talked about how he likes the way the Penguins are structured on paper, but the results on the ice he's less than thrilled with. What are your thoughts on Ron Hextall's statement? I know that this is a special draft, that this draft is deeper than most others, and that you're in a spot probably in the mid-teens to early 20s to get a special player that can impact your franchise. But given where this team is, having re-signed Evgeny Malkin to a 4-year deal, having re-signed Chris Letang to a 6-year deal, why would you be holding back your first-round pick if you can improve your team? My argument would be not just for now at the deadline with a rental, but get a player and re-sign him long-term with some of those contracts that are coming off the books.
Yeah, you think about a player like even a Brock Besser or someone who maybe you could have under cost control for a little while that might help out. I think this team really misses Evan Rodriguez, which I didn't expect I'd say from last season, who's now at the Avalanche. But it kind of is Hextall 101, right? Like he's always been a little bit conservative in how he approaches things, which I appreciate. But it does feel like this window is going to close real fast for the Penguins if they don't act on it. Like, you don't want to still be trying to go for things in the years 5 and 6 of the Malkin or Crosby deal when you don't know what it's going to be. Like, in time's now, man. So I'm not surprised by his logic. I'd like to have a first rounder in this pick as well. I'd like to do it differently. I'd like to do it with maybe a player and a second rounder if I had to, but I just don't know what's available that's really going to move the needle for this team if that's the way that Hextall wants to do it. Like, I think if it's a first rounder, maybe this team gets back on track. They haven't been consistent enough. Just like you said, it was a very honest evaluation of his club. But I think they need a push, Frank. And it may take a first rounder to do that. And like I say, like, you don't want to be waiting until years 3, 4, 5, 6 of those contracts for their 3 big players for this team to contend again.
Well, and that's really the ideal time frame in which you'd be able to get that first round pick into your lineup, is years 3, 4, right. 5, and 6. So to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense, their posture. And when you think about the spot that they're in, like I said, get someone that you can put in the lineup now. Like, here's an ideal candidate that I'm thinking of, someone like a Timo Meier. You have potentially the assets in order to make it work if you're willing to trade that first round pick. And with Dumoulin and Zucker coming off the books, that's $9 and some million. You can, especially trading someone like Kasperi Kapanen back, you can make the money work. Go after and get those elite centers that you have, some star wingers to play on your team now and for the foreseeable future to help you with both the here and now. I think when you commit all those dollars to those players at that age for that term, to turn around at this deadline and sort of act half pregnant doesn't really make a lot of sense, because there is no such thing as being half pregnant. Let's talk about the Florida Panthers and their big win over the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Battle of Florida on Monday night. It was really a lopsided affair, with the Florida Panthers coming away with a 7-1 win over the Lightning, who just looked to be a little bit disjointed, to say the least. And when you take a look at, not so much from the Tampa perspective, because we're going to be joined by Erik Erlendsson shortly to talk Tampa Bay Lightning, but from a Florida Panthers perspective, when you look at the standings, we knew a push was needed in this unofficial second half of the season. Is it too far to say that this was a statement win for the Cats?
I think it's obviously a big win coming back, and it looks good on paper, but this was a little bit closer game than it looked. Bobrovsky was really good. Vasilevsky was flat out bad. It's only the second time in his career he's been dinged for 7 goals against. That was surprising. But when I think about the Panthers, they got one X factor on this club, man, that's named Matthew Tkachuk, that in the past 2 seasons, he's 3rd in the NHL in scoring across the board. He's 5th in the NHL this year. And when the Panthers have their full lineup, when Barkov's there, who, by the way, left the game last night, that's worrisome, blocked a shot with his hand, I think they could contend. What they're going to run into, though, Frank, is teams have games in hand on them. Panthers and the Islanders, they're both at 53 games. The teams they're contending with have much less, Washington, Pittsburgh, that are in the mix, Buffalo as well. So the Panthers, bottom line, they're going to have to go on a heater to make the playoffs. Like, they're going to have to win like 8 of 10 games at some point here and really run the table. And with Matthew Tkachuk, maybe that can happen. But without Barkov, I still think it's going to be difficult for this Panthers team. But they're definitely in the mix. You can't write them off yet. I'd just be surprised if they finally get over the hump to make it into the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, such a tough blow for Barkov. You watch that play over and over again. It was like this close to hitting his shin pad instead of catching him in the hand. When you've watched Barkov this season, what's wrong with him? I know he's still over a point per game pace, 47 points in 43 games. He just doesn't look like nearly the same threat this year.
Well, I just think across the board with the Panthers, it's looked a little bit out of sync, and I'm not sure whether that comes from having, just a new coach or a different voice. Obviously, Barkov was pretty good for Brunette. He was pretty good for Gerard Gallant before that. He's been good under a lot of coaches. I haven't seen him really have the same speed and be able to take over games with quickness that I have in the past. And that's where I'm kind of curious if he's where he needs to be. But he's still an unbelievable player. I just keep wondering if Tkachuk and Barkov team up more. It's been a lot of Bennett and Tkachuk. Do we see more of Barkov and Tkachuk? Could that happen? Tough to call, man. Tkachuk's performing pretty well alongside Bennett.
Yeah, if they can get everyone healthy too, depending on, again, the Barkov injury and what happens with Duclair and his rehab from the Achilles, and what's going on with Patrick Hornquist and his concussion, they may have a salary cap decision to make from a compliance perspective as well. One-word answer, yes or no, do the Florida Panthers get in?
No.
Okay. Mark that down. Mike McKenna says no. Let's get to our deadline countdown date. Today is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Let's talk with Erik Erlendsson. That's right. Pleased to be joined for this week's edition of the All 32, which is delivered by our friends at Montana's Erik Erlendsson to talk Tampa Bay Lightning from lightninginsider.com. Erik, always great to see you. And my big question for you, when you take a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, which under Julien BriseBois have been very aggressive at the last number of deadlines, and rightly so. If you look at this group as they're currently constituted, no first round or second round pick this year, no first round pick in 2024, they may want to be aggressive, but how aggressive can they be with their lack of assets and a relative lack of prospects?
It's a task. There's no doubt about it. But Julien BriseBois has certainly shown over the past 3 trade deadlines how aggressive he wants to be. You know, he recognizes the opportunity for this core of players, you know, Stamkos and Hedman and these guys who are still in their 30s, Kucherov, Vasilevsky in their late 20s. The window's still open. And if he can find a way to move assets to help the team this year. And the thing to look for is it somebody that can help beyond this year, right? We've seen that with Blake Coleman and Barclay Goodrow, where both still had 1 more years remaining on their contract when they acquired them in 2020. Brandon Hagel has contract term when they acquired him. Nick Paul was a pending UFA, but they found a way to sign him to a 7-year contract. So those are the type of players that Julien likes to identify. They're not going deep sea hunting, right? They're not going into those deep waters to bring in a big name because they just don't have the cap space and they probably don't have the collateral to bring somebody like that in. So he's probably looking for a player we haven't even thought about right now. But one thing with Julien, we know he's going to find a way to do something to kind of give this team a little bolster.
So, Erik, put your GM hat on here. I mean, the Tampa Bay's been solid all year. They've been in the mix, but they haven't really hit like mega stage. You know, they haven't been as scary as maybe a Boston sometimes this season. If you're looking to round out this Tampa Bay club, where do you see weaknesses? Where do you think BriseBois would like to add to bolster his chances heading into this year's Stanley Cup playoffs?
Well, the defense was a question mark, the blue line going into training camp, and I don't think they've gotten enough answers there. I think Nick Perbix has been a big surprise for them, coming out of St. Cloud State last year and jumping right in the NHL and taking on some good quality minutes. So he's been a big surprise, whereas Philip Myers has been a disappointment, right? And he's playing down in Syracuse right now. So he's not even on the roster. He hasn't been the reclamation project yet that they were hoping he would be. So that's an area. I know they've been linked to Luke Schenn, big physical right-hand shot defenseman, obviously familiar with the Lightning, having been with them for those 2 cup championships in 20 and 21. Again, if you get into a bidding more, though, for a right-hand shot defenseman, which is what a lot of teams look for this time of year, I don't know that they're going to be able to outbid another team for Luke Schenn's services to get him out of Vancouver and bring him back here. And then the other area, too, is they haven't had the depth forward-wise that they've had the past couple years, which has been a strength of theirs. So they've been really top-heavy with Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov and Steven Stamkos and Brandon Hagel providing a lot of the offense. So if you're looking for somebody that can kind of maybe bring some scoring to the bottom lines, that would be a big help. I mean, Ross Colton had 20 goals last year. He just hit the 10-goal mark right before the All-Star break. Vladimir Mestikov is a 12 to 15 goal scorer. He's got 3 at this time of the year. So they don't have the same type of production from their bottom 6 that they've had in past years, which is a big reason why they probably haven't been able to go on that type of run. I mean, you look at their road record this year. They're 12-12 on the road. And I know the adage is you win your home games and go 500 on the road, and they're playing that formula to a T. They've got 12 straight home wins coming into tonight's game against San Jose. But the matchup situation on the road, I think that's a big reason why they are just 12-12 away from Amalie Arena. So it's the depth on the bottom 6 that I think is an area they'd like to look at too.
Yeah, Erik, I was wondering if they maybe turn to Chicago again for another depth add, someone with term, someone like Sam Lafferty who has some elite speed. Next year he's locked up at $1.15 million, certainly fits Tampa's cap. And I just look at that 4th line and say, man, that's someone that could maybe use a little bit of speed to inject into that lineup and maybe cajole a couple goals, maybe some penalty killing help as well. But I wanted to ask you to go back to the first question about some of the assets that might be in play from a Tampa perspective. And this will maybe get Mike excited as well. If you look at someone like Hugo Alnefelt, who's in Syracuse, is that the top trade chip that they have prospect-wise, given that, as good as he's played this year in Syracuse, someone that probably has a roadblock up in place to really make an impact at the NHL level when you consider Andrei Vasilevsky in net?
Yeah, 88 is a big roadblock for any goaltender in the system. There's no doubt about
Like
that.
literally big.
Yeah. And a big presence. He casts a big shadow. There's a lot of analogies we can use there. Look, Julian has proven that he's not concerned about trading prospects like that. And if that's your biggest chip, that's your biggest chip. I mean, he didn't hesitate at all trading Nolan Foote a couple years ago to bring in Blake Coleman here. He was their first round draft pick that year, and a lot of people were excited about his shot and everything that he could do. So he's not afraid to do that. You look at a guy too like Isaac Howard, who was their first round draft pick last year. He hasn't transitioned to college as quickly as maybe they'd hope, but that's not unusual for players like that. Highly skilled type of forward. They wouldn't. I don't think they would hesitate to move him. Jack Finley is a 6'6" center. They get playing down in Syracuse. So they don't have blue chip assets because that's what happens when you draft 28th, 29th, 30th every year, and then you trade your first round draft pick. So they don't have the big name prospects, but they get guys who are solid NHL prospects in their pipeline. And if they're going to they don't have the draft picks to move, but they do have the prospects to move. And that's an area where if you're going to maybe bring in a player that has some pedigree, that's an area of the prospect depth that you can look at, because their track record of producing players and getting them in the developmental system here has just been phenomenal. I mean, Nick Perbix is another example of it this year, where nobody really knew who Nick Perbix was, right? He's a 6th round draft pick. He was playing at St. Cloud State. He kind of put his name out there when he made the U.S. Olympic team last year. But he's just come in and played just super solid minutes for a team that really needed a defenseman to come in and step up. So they have that track record. So, even looking at some of those prospects, if you're another team, you're saying, hey, the Lighty know how to develop players. If we bring him in, he might be a good NHL prospect.
Yeah, they certainly know how to pick players too, hitting on rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7, certainly more than many other NHL teams have in the last number of years. And if you don't have first round picks, that's certainly the only way that you can do it. Thanks so much to Erik Erlendsson for joining us today for some fantastic insight on the Tampa Bay Lightning. 24 days to go until the NHL's trade deadline on March 3rd. We've got the deadline countdown series on dailyfaceoff.com. You can check out our Lightning playbook later today, and you can follow Erik Erlendsson on Twitter, Erik_Erlendsson, and lightninginsider.com, one of the best in the business. Thanks so much to Erik for joining us for this week's All 32, which is delivered by our friends at Montana's. They're bringing back the viewing party all season long at Montana's. They've got their daily deals going. You see Tuesday, $5 tacos with the purchase of any beverage. They've also got their new comfort menu going, and we have a promotion going on our social media channels. Head on over to the Daily Faceoff Instagram. You can win yourself a $50 Montana's gift card, which would certainly go a long way with those daily deals. Here are the details, and head over to montanas.ca for more information. Thanks, Erik.
Yep, my pleasure. And hey, for Mike, I wore my Rock and Roll Hall of Fame shirt.
Perfect. Love to see that. So Erik's got his Rock and Roll Hall of Fame t-shirt. If you didn't know, Mike McKenna is a big heavy metal fan. So there you go. Mike, speaking of sartorial suggestions, Erik had the t-shirt. What do you make of the Devils post-game hat? That's our Daily Face-Off inbox question of the day. It says here, pass or fail. I'm going to say, is it dope or nope?
Oh, dude, this is wicked. Like, this is awesome, man. That hat is absolutely ridiculous. I'm all for completely stupid post-game awards. It's better than the championship belt that every team has had for years. So I'll give you an example. My daughter's squirt team, Frank, they've got a hard hat that was found on the side of the highway that we sanitized. That's their Player of the Game award. So I love it, dude. What do you think?
So, of course, if you're new, this is a follow of the Devils jersey that says jersey. So now they have a hat that says hat. I don't know, man. I think this is as cheesy as it gets. And by the way, having been in a ton of youth hockey locker rooms, I think the player of the game is a little awkward, especially when you're dealing with 8 and 10-year-old kids. Invariably, you have a whole room of kids every night that end up being disappointed. So I don't know. I'd prefer if we didn't do that.
Hey, that gives them something to look forward to. It teaches them to celebrate the kids that don't necessarily all score. We're teaching life lessons.
I was going to say that's a big thing, because invariably on our team we have one kid that never passes the puck and just scores all the goals. So maybe that's part of the issue. That brings us to Tyler Yaremchuk and our Daily Face-Off Pointsbet Daily Bet segment. Tyler, what do you got?
First off, some 8-year-old is catching strays here from Frank Seravalli on a live show. Also,
He
Frank
should.
using the word dope today.
We have a kid on our team that has 56 goals in 10 games, and I appreciate the hustle, but son, you need to move the puck.
Yeah. Wait till you have kids,
they've
Tyler.
never-
You'll learn here. You'll learn. Every team's got one or two of them. My team
To that
doesn't.
kid, keep it up. They never draft the whole team. They only draft one player. So you keep rolling, buddy. Let's get into my picks for tonight's slate, courtesy of Pointsbet Canada. I love having hockey back, and I like this matchup here at the top. The Edmonton Oilers, yes, they are on the road coming out of the All-Star break, but they have been a great road bet all season. The Red Wings, very average heading into the break. So, yeah, maybe the time off did something well for them, but I also think that you could say the same thing for the Oilers, who were 7-1-2 in their last 10 heading into the All-Star break. I like the Oilers. I like the puck line, plus 145. Let's chase a little bit of juice. And then my second one is a little shot prop parlay. I had some success with this in the month of January, so I'm looking to roll it into February as well. 2 players, both the lines are set at 1.5. William Karlsson has 13 shots on goal in his last 5 games. I think this is a great spot for him tonight. He had 5 shots in his last game, so he only needs 2. It's a good spot. You play that with Vince Dunn over 1.5, which, again, he's got 13 shots on goal in his last 5 games as well. Been hitting this pretty consistently all season. Play those 2 together. It's plus 141. There's 2 picks for tonight at plus 140. And Frank, I know you were riding with me on the Anaheim Ducks last night. A heartbreaking shootout loss. Damn, so close.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping that you didn't bring that up. But hey, I love the odds, love the juice, and that's why you play the game. You try and extract as much money as you can. I hate playing the chalk all the time. So thanks to Tyler for our PointsBet Daily Bet segment. That brings us to garbage time and Mike McKenna. And Mike, you notice that this is an important anniversary for a game in number 66 career.
That's right. Super Mario, 20 years ago, yesterday. My friend Kurt Hartley pointed this out on Twitter. Mario Lemieux went crazy in a game, okay? And he got 29 penalty minutes in 1 stoppage of play. And it reads, slashing, instigator, fighting, misconduct, game misconduct. The game was a whole schmozzle. There's YouTube of it. There's fights. There's things everywhere. But what ended up happening is Brad Ferentz, who I played with in Omaha, the American Hockey League for the Omaha Exarban Knights, we called him Bitsy because he was so bitter all the time. Well, Bitsy drove everybody bananas, right? Former first-round pick. And Lemieux had enough of them. They'd already had an altercation about 4 minutes before, and they came across the blue line. Lemieux 2-hands him, then goes after him. And the best part of this, Frank, Mike Keenan's coaching the Florida Panthers. The Panthers are up 6-0, so obviously the Pittsburgh Penguins are pretty angry. The captain, Super Mario, is making a point. But Mario had 29 penalty minutes in this game. In the entire season that year, he had 43 PIMs. So he took like 3/4 of all his penalty minutes in one game because Brad Ferentz drove him over the edge.
2 things. One, I would say that Bitsy is an incredible nickname, and I feel like it might stick in my house for me. And 2, if you look at Mario Lemieux, he did have 1 season of 100 penalty minutes back in the same year, 1988-89, that he had 199 points, which is kind of bananas. And I don't know. I just think when you're a player of that ilk, you're just like, come on, Pigeon, get away from me. Like, you don't need the extracurriculars. So I love that he got fired up enough to take matters into his own hands.
Yeah. I mean, imagine Connor McDavid doing that, right? Austin Matthews just beating the wheels off someone. It just doesn't happen anymore.
Sign me up. I think we'd all like a little more juice like we saw on Monday night at Madison Square Garden. Mike, that'll do it for today's edition of Daily Faceoff Live. We'll be back 12 noon Eastern on Wednesday. You know where to find us. Subscribe to the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel, and we'll talk to you then. Until then, have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss